Thank you all for coming. I appreciate you being here, being involved in this workshop. This is the second of 5. We had a workshop yesterday with a panel discussion that went extremely well. So we appreciate you of those that are coming back to the second event. We've got 3 more. And at the end of the event today, I'll talk more about those last 3 events that we've got this week. But before we do that, I want to introduce our guest and host today, who's going to be walking us through this great workshop. Her name is Sue Troia. She attended Wayne State University studying education and art history. She began at the Detroit Institute of Art in 1995 in the Department of Education. In 1996, she began traveling to Boston to train in the virtual thinking strategy, which is what she's going to work with us today, working with developers of Dr. Abigail Hausen and Philip Yenowin. She became a lead trainer in VTS, joining a small but quickly growing community of educators in the museum and schools across the country. Sue's current role at the DIA is a senior trainer in mentoring a small group of co-trainers and VTS coaches newer to the process. She also manages and supervises a team of professional teachers who develop and teach and interact in interactive school learning experiences for nearly 100,000 school kids in Southeast Michigan. As a VTS trainer, she has gone to K-12 and has grown. This training has grown in colleges and university. Outside of education, VTS has shown itself to be useful in tools in areas of medical training and healthcare, first responders, corporations, and specifically as it relates to unconscious bias, social determinants of health, observation, communication, team building, and self-care. So with that introduction, I would like to give a warm virtual OCC welcome to Sue Troia. Sue, thank you.
Hi, thank you, Ken. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. And I already warned Ken and everyone else, I'm going to probably keep saying good morning. I'm kind of stuck. My time is all way off. You've heard enough about me. I want to introduce my co-trainer today, Willie Moultrie. Willie?
Hello, everyone. My name is Willie Moultrie.
Yep. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Willie.
Yeah, my name is Willie Moultrie. I am a gallery teacher at the Detroit Institute of Arts right under Sue Troia. And I lead school tours K through 12. And it is a curriculum tie-in experience around the museum. And I'll be here to kind of co-host and join the chat as well at times.
Yeah, Willie has ample experience with the process and with our galleries, and his voice will be a wonderful one for us to have included. So with that, I just want to just let you know how it's going to go today. I'm going to pull up my slides here in just a moment. But just to know that at the very end of this, I'm going to take a few minutes to look at some images by Black artists that are in the DIA's collection. We have Black History Month right around the corner already, and in addition to the Martin Luther King holiday. And so it just seems like I should spend a little time showing you what is currently on view at the DIA, and just a little snapshot. I also want to talk a little bit about 2 special exhibitions that we have in the museum right now. Both are free, and we encourage you to come see those, and also how to do that and do it safely. The DIA has some very stringent safety protocols in place. They can feel a little, obsessive and tough, but they're there for a reason. We're one of the only museums that remained open during the surge, the second surge of the virus. So, and part of that was because of the safety protocols we had put in place. And then I'm going to give you a little hint about what's coming soon to the DIA. We have 2 major exhibitions coming up next year. They were supposed to be this year. The pandemic said, yeah, no, you're not doing that. So we shoved them to next year. But they're very exciting. And then I'm going to end with giving you my contact information, because I want you to be able to reach out to me if you need additional help, some images, some support, some advice, or just have questions. There's also a slide deck that I've put together. It's greatly reduced from what I have today. As I've warned Ken, he's sat in my workshops before, and Willie also knows this, I way over prepare for any workshop. And so I have way more images and slides than I'm ever going to use, but I put together a nice little package for you guys. So don't worry about taking notes. Just sit back and let's have this. I want this to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to put comments in the chat, or to even just call out some things. You can put your You can put your, you can put your comments in the chat, or you can also, Willie's going to be watching that for me. Or you can also just, put your hand up and talk to me. I would love to hear your voices. So let's get started. Ken, let's share my screen here. Let's get going. All right. Let me get rid of this because that's going to annoy me. Let's go to our first slide. Here we go. So we've done our introductions, and I've also taken care of housekeeping already. How this is going to go for the next couple of hours is we're going to look at a lot of images. Some of them will have discussions, and we'll be deconstructing them throughout the 2 hours we're together. There will also be some that we're just going to stop and look at for a moment because I have way too many. So I want to make sure that you at least get to see them for a minute. We're going to review the process. We're going to talk about how to select good images for having these types of discussions. And then we're going to do a deep dive into Abigail and Philip, who Ken introduced you to in my introduction, and talk about how it was developed. And then the impact on writing, where aesthetic development and where growth and cognitive thinking and aesthetic thinking happened first or was visible first was in writing and the student impact on writing. And I want to show you a writing sample that brings that out really, really nicely. We're going to spend a little bit of time on self-reflection because we should all do that. And then at the end, there's images from the DIA. And I've also got a little break in there. I'm a firm believer of getting up and stretching. So once we've been sitting here for about halfway through this, we're going to stop and give everyone a minute or two to just stand up and stretch. And then we'll come back for the final part. The images on the screen right now are 3 that are pulled from the DIA's program Inside Out that are on the campuses of OCC and Auburn Hills and Royal Oak. There are way more images than this. So I hope that if you visit the campuses, you take advantage of seeing some of these images, these reproductions in person. All right, any questions so far? Not? We're going to get started. All right. Some of these images might be familiar to you. That's okay. We're going to have the discussion anyway. So let's take a moment to look at this one. Because this process is discussion-based, you're welcome to just call out or enter things into the chat. Willie and Ken will let me know what shows up in the chat. So I'm going to ask you the first question. What's going on in this picture?
I'm getting some people are coming in saying mealtime,
Okay.
family time.
Okay, mealtime, family time. All right. Can you tell me some more about that? What do you see that makes you say it's mealtime?
Well, I see the plates there. Maybe it's just after mealtime, and it looks like the mother has her hands full with, the three kids, and I don't know. It looks like one is holding a baby doll. It looks like,
Okay.
and it just looks like a pretty tight quarters.
Okay. All right. So Beverly, you've given me a few things. You're looking at this group, you're identifying it as possibly a family. They've had a meal either just before, just after, or they're getting ready to something with a meal because of the plates and the bowls that are right here in front. This very compact space, and this little girl appears to be holding a baby doll. Okay, great. Thank you. What more can we find?
I'm getting someone has put in generations and family hangout.
Okay, generations and family hangout. Let's dive into that a little bit. What do you see that makes you say generations and family hangout?
All right, Sue, I just got one in as well. I have one that says empty bowls and someone looking a little tired in the other room from her reflection.
Okay, so you're giving me a lot here. We've got some empty bowls, and we've got the woman over here in the mirror who looks a little tired. What do you see that makes you say she looks tired? Don't be shy.
Eyes are closed. She's sitting.
Okay, Donna, you're looking at the way she's sitting over here, and to you, she looks tired. There's something in her body language that tells you she's tired?
Yeah, her eyes are closed. Her head's
Okay.
down a little bit. Shoulders are down.
Okay, so her posture, the way her face looks, everything about her says this is a woman who's a little weary that's sitting here in this reflection. Thank you. What more can we find?
You got another chat that just came in that says, I think she is admiring the photo. And
Okay.
someone responded to the previous statement saying, yes, body language.
Okay, so you have someone agreeing with the comment that there's something in her body language that says she's tired. And someone else has commented and said that it looks as if she appears to be contemplating the photograph. What do you see that makes you say that? That's a different way of looking at her. So I'd like to dive into that just a little bit. What do you see that makes you say that?
Okay, got a few more comments that just came in. One comment mentioned, mom has to go to work, so grandma is taking care of the kids.
Okay. All right, stop right there. 1 second.
Absolutely.
Can
Yeah,
you
sure.
identify who that person is? I'm going to put them on the spot a little bit.
It's from William.
Okay, William. So you're, let me see if I got this straight. I just want to make sure I understand correctly. You're suggesting this is the mother and that this is grandma who's going to be taking care of the children while she goes to work. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And what do you see that makes you say that this is the mother and this is the grandmother?
Just looking at the ages of the people in the picture, the woman that's sitting with the kids around seems to be old enough to be their grandmother potentially, and the woman sitting on the bed looks old enough to be the children's mother. And it's sort of this wistful look that she has, looking at them like, I have to go to work. Just look at grandma taking care of my children for me. You know, obviously it's a story that's running in my head, but that's what I see.
All right, so for you, you're looking at different features on both of these women and sort of giving us an age. That this one appears to be a little bit older, so she could be the grandmother. This one appears younger and perhaps the mother of the children. And that she has this somewhat, you're giving another way of looking at her face, that she's a somewhat wistful look at her face. That here's her kids, mom, grandma's helping out with the kids, but she's got to leave them and go to work. Did I get that?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. What more can we find?
Another comment mentioned, I think she's looking fondly at the photo on a dresser, possibly her ancestors.
Okay.
This is a comment made by Carol.
Carol? Carol, tell me about that. What do you see that makes you say that these could be ancestors and that she's looking fondly at that photograph? Someone else had made that same comment, so I'm curious to dive into that a little bit.
Well, I think that the couple in the photo is dressed very grandly and kind of looks like old-fashioned.
Okay.
I don't know. I love the way they're dressed, and I think the woman sitting on the bed is looking at them with a look of love. That these are her grandparents or great grandparents. She's very fond of them. And I don't know, that's what I see. And I'm not so sure the woman on the left is the grandma. To me, she could be the mom, mother of 4, and the young lady in the bedroom reflected in the mirror could be her eldest daughter.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, so you're giving us a couple of things to think about. You're giving us a new way of looking at a couple of ideas that we've already explored and then some new things. But you're giving us another way of thinking about this family dynamic here and suggesting that this could be the mother of 4 children and that this is the oldest child rather than the mother of the small children here. And then you're also giving us, again, thinking about that generational aspect that came up earlier. These could be the grandparents or great-grandparents. And you were struck by the way they dressed and the elegance of the photograph and how she's looking at that photograph, which someone else had mentioned as well, that this somewhat feeling of love or affection or fondness for the people in this photograph. Did I get all that?
Yes, you did. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. What more can we find?
There's another comment that mentioned could even be a wedding photo of her and her husband who could have passed on. Another reason for her wistfulness. This is a comment made by Anne.
Anne? Thank you, Anne. So you're giving us, I think, if I want to make sure I understand correctly, you're looking at possibly giving us identity for the people in the photograph. And that the man in the photograph could be someone who's passed on or away. And are you thinking this woman is the wife or this woman is the wife?
And commented by saying mirror reflection.
Thank you. So the woman in the mirror could be the woman in the photograph, and she's looking at the photograph intently and with this expression because perhaps her husband has passed on. Okay, thank you. What more can we find?
Another comment was made that says there is a calendar which could suggest another reference to time passing along with the old photograph. And this was made by Allison.
Did you say Alex or Alice?
Allison.
Allison, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you,
absolutely.
Willie. So you're looking here on the wall and you're noticing that there's a calendar. And for you, that could also suggest a passage of time. Thank you. What more can we find? Tell me some more about where or when this is happening.
I'm thinking it might be in the 50s, maybe. The furniture kind of gives me a clue that it might be from that era.
Okay.
It's a pretty fancy vanity, I think, for that time frame. And just looking at the clothes and how the clothes in the photograph, the 8x10 photograph, and thinking that was at a celebration, maybe a wedding, or maybe the couple went to church and they took a photograph, and that frame was from that particular time period. And so I just see that it was a time period of perhaps joy in the house and lots of activity, because when you have children in the house, typically joy comes along with activity. A little bit of chaos too with children that age. But nonetheless, the children bringing joy during that time period, and the furniture kind of gives me a clue or suggests that it might be in the 50s.
Okay, all right, thank you, Beverly. You're looking at the furniture and giving us a suggestion that we're looking at perhaps the 1950s. The style of furniture, the type of, even the photograph, and that the photograph could be documenting a special event, perhaps a wedding. And that this framed photograph has sort of become almost a centerpiece in this image and in this room. And so you're also talking about the overall mood or feeling of the image, and it's one of joy. When there's children, there's joy. And as you commented, there's also chaos. But children bring happiness, and having this family together in this space has a joyful feel to it. And so you're thinking perhaps the 1950s, adding all that together. Thank you. What more can we find?
Looks like it's summer because it looks like the door in the background is open. The kids aren't dressed, they're dressed very lightly.
Okay. Thank you, Donna. So you're looking back here, you're noticing that this doorway is open to the outside, and that the children are dressed in light clothes, even the adult is dressed in light clothes, and that suggests to you that a time of year that we're looking at warm weather, perhaps this summer. Thank you. Let's take a couple more. What more can we find?
This is Candy Jeter.
Hi, Candy.
I'm thinking that this is taking place in the South, in like Mississippi.
Okay.
And also it looks like it might be like after dinner time, like mid-evening, because it just reminds me of when I was down south, that's how it kind of looks. So that's what I'm thinking, that maybe it's in the South.
Okay. All right. So Candy, you're giving us a location. And based on your personal knowledge, you traveled to the South, you've seen images or places like this, and suggesting that we're looking at perhaps maybe the area around Mississippi or somewhere in the South. This type of family gathering, this type of dwelling would be prevalent there. And plus the warm weather. Thank you. What more can we find? One or two more?
Yeah, there's a few comments that just came in.
Okay.
One comment from Carol said, the open door in back looks out to the yard. This gives a feeling of more space.
Okay. So I'm sorry, who was that?
Carol.
Carol, thank you. So Carol, you're building on that idea, this open door back here, which gives us a sense of space and depth, that even though the space inside feels compressed, we've got this openness that's beyond that door. Thank you. What more can we find?
There was another comment made by Allison that mentioned, well, she was asking a question or maybe suggesting something, but it says, is that an ice box in the back? Not a refrigerator, but an ice box.
All right. So Allison's looking back here at this contraption and wondering what it is. Is it an ice box or is it a refrigerator? Does anyone have any ideas about that?
I think it's an ice box also.
Okay, so Donna, you're building on the idea that this is an ice box. Can you tell us about an ice box? What is an ice box?
The refrigerator that needs ice.
Yeah, very simply put, yes. The Iceman would come around and bring a block of ice, and you'd put it in the bottom, I think, and then your things would go in the top to keep cold. Before there was a mass distribution of electric refrigerators. Very good, thank you. All right, let's take one more. What more can we find?
There was another comment made by Christian, and it mentions, I agree, in the ice box. Also, the iron probably gets heated on the stove, maybe 1940s. So I guess they're suggesting the time period.
So Christian's zeroing in on the time frame too, and making it a little bit earlier, perhaps the 1940s. Earlier we thought maybe 50s, now perhaps 40s. And noticing that iron that's on top of the ice box, which would have been heated on a stove. So perhaps we're looking at something from around the time of the Great Depression, maybe in the 1940s. Okay, good. Let's end that right there. I want to just, see if what you thought, just to sit back, look at a work of art, and just talk about it. What did you notice? What did you see happening?
I thought it was interesting how we all looked at it and came away with different perspectives of it, and how in some cases our knowledge of what we know about certain things that we see in the picture or whatever, we're able to share that out too and apply that to the picture.
Yeah, everyone was looking at the same image, but you were all saying something a little bit different. Sometimes you had different perspectives on what it was you were seeing, and everyone got to share that. And you got to hear what other people were thinking. You got to, maybe discover something new and have questions answered, such as the icebox. And, really begin to dive into what is the evidence, what is in front of me, and how am I interpreting this work. Okay, good. What else did you notice? Anything about the process, anything I was doing?
Just making us look at more of the detail and going beneath the surface of it.
Yeah, for sure. And when we all do it, when we look at an image, we'll sometimes just see what's on the surface. Even, if it's not an image, it can be something that we're looking at on the street or something that we're, even reading a book. We'll just look at what's on the surface. But what the process does is slows it down a little. And it really gets you to look beneath that surface and look at some of the details that are there. Because all those little details are clues that are going to help to tell the story. Does that make sense? Are there any questions so far? So we're going to do another discussion, then we're going to dive into the process a little bit. All right, let's go to the next image. Take a moment to look at this. And just a quick note, you will see on this slide I have added DIA that will let you know that these are images that are on view or in the DIA's collection.
My apologies, Sue. I just realized
That's
a few
all
more
right.
comments came in.
Sure, absolutely.
Carol mentioned that there's a lot to see in this photo. I believe it's the previous photo that we're talking about.
Yep.
There's a lot to see in this photo. Hearing other people's ideas is fascinating.
Yeah, it can, we've had people say that they've changed their minds about things as they've listened to what other people brought into the conversation, or that, like I said earlier, that they learned something that they didn't know. You can also learn about your friends or your peers or the other person in the room, or your students. As teachers use the process, they have commented that they've learned a lot about how their students think, what their students are going through perhaps at home, or their students' perspectives. There's been a lot of things that have helped them with the process. And it's fascinating to see where it's going to go. I never tire of having the conversations because I always am interested to see who's going to notice what and where's it going to go and what am I going to hear that's new. And I almost always hear something that's new. So thank you for sharing that. That was awesome. Let's go back here. And tell me what's going on in this picture.
He's a warrior.
Okay, Donna, you're identifying this person as a warrior. Tell me about that. What do you see that makes you say that?
Just the sword, the way he's holding himself on a steed.
Okay, all right. So we got the guy on the white horse,
charging.
the rearing white horse. He's got a sword. He's got his body posture. Everything tells you that this is a warrior. Okay, good. What more can we find?
I
We
would
got a
say
few
he's,
comments.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, lots of stuff. Go ahead.
His outfit
I'm so
totally
sorry.
clashes with the time of the horses.
Okay, Sarah, you're noticing the way he's dressed compared to the horse, and you're noticing a little bit of a discrepancy between the time period of this horse and the time period of the man. Let's dive into that a little bit. What do you see that makes you say that? Tell me some more.
His sagging jeans.
Okay, all right. He's got the sagging jeans on. What more do we find?
Yeah, you got a few comments in. Ellen mentioned a general.
Oh, a general. All right, Ellen, tell me about that. What do you see that makes you say general?
All right. I believe she replied maybe the jacket. That could be
Okay.
another comment, though. I'm not necessarily. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Because it is an homage to Napoleon crossing the Apennines.
Gotcha. So for you, there's a reference here to an earlier painting that featured the French ruler Napoleon. And so it feels as if it's got that same type of Napoleonic imagery. Okay, good. What more can we find?
I've got a comment here. He's a warrior fighting for his cause.
Okay, got a warrior fighting for his cause. What do you see that makes you say that?
The cannon. They said
Okay. All right, so looking way back here in the background, you're noticing this cannon, and that suggests to you a warrior. Okay, awesome. Fighting for his cause, and someone earlier had also said warrior. Excellent. What more can we find?
There was a comment made by Haley, or Hallie, please correct me if I'm incorrect. But it mentions his shoes, his tattoo, his shirt do not match the time period of the horse, the sword, and the cannon in the distance.
Okay, so as someone, Haley, thank you. As someone had said earlier, they noticed that the jeans, the sagging jeans, were not from the same time period. You're building on that a little bit, looking at the Timberland boots, the jacket, and the figure himself is just not fitting with the time frame for this horse and the cannon that's in the background. So we've got this rather contemporary looking figure in a setting from a long time ago, which builds on the idea that someone brought up earlier of the image being perhaps reflective of the Napoleonic type hero pictures. Okay, good. Let's take a couple more. What more can we find?
I've got a comment here that says he's seen as a savior.
Seen as a savior. Let's dive into that a little bit. What do you see that makes you say you see him as a savior?
Well, is that his purple jacket or is generally a sign of like royalty or someone in a position of power, but his youth kind of belies that in a sense. So I'm thinking, I don't know who the author, or I'm sorry, the painter is, but probably someone younger. And so I assume this guy's like a revolutionary coming to kind of, I don't know, get rid of the old guard.
Sure. Okay, Anthony, that you gave us a lot. Want to make sure I got it all. You're looking at the purple coat in particular, which is a sign of royalty.
Yeah.
And that the fact that this man and this horse is also very young, there's a sense that, he's sort of the new revolutionary that's coming into this scene. And we're going to look at this image again later, but it is by the artist Kahinda Wiley, and you're absolutely right. He's quite young. So thank you for sharing. Let's take one or two more. What more can we find?
This is Sandra Foster. I'm noticing the face. Hi. I'm noticing the face or the head of a cheetah that's on the cover of the saddle that he's sitting on. That's like right at the rear.
Yeah.
That just caught a look at that. I'm not sure what it symbolizes, but.
Yeah, if you're looking at the saddle, this sort of like almost like a blanket saddle kind of thing. And at the very back of it, right by the guy's rear end, you can see at the face of the cheetah where the pelt would have come from. Good, thank you. And you're curious about that. Why or what? Why would this be there? Does anyone have any ideas about that? Why a cheetah skin or a cheetah pelt in the saddle?
Just to take a guess, looking at him, I thought it had to do something with his probably African-American race. But I'm also looking at this and I'm thinking that he is a warrior, but I'm thinking he's a modern day warrior, but fighting the things of the past. And that's the two images that seem to be going on with the cannon and everything, but yet he's in the sword. So that's kind of my
okay. All right. So Candy, thank you. The cheetah saddle could be a reference to the man's African-American heritage. And you're also looking at, we've got, again, giving us a way of thinking about the discrepancy between, or the disparity between the youthfulness of this man and the setting he's in. And that he's young and he's a warrior, but he's fighting things from the past. There are things that are still happening that he's still fighting against. Thank you very much for that comment. That was awesome. I'm going to end that one there for the sake of time, because we've already been going for a half an hour, believe it or not. And we're going to dive into that process a little bit. But first, I want to ask you, how was this, what was this conversation like for you, even though it was a little bit shorter? But we had a photograph from the artist Gordon Parks as our first image. And then now we're looking at a contemporary painting. And I want you to think about the differences in those, how we approached them, how you looked at them, anything you noticed about the conversations.
One thing I noticed in the conversation is it seemed like in the first picture, which was a photograph, we were looking to seek to get some answers about time and place. Where in this photograph, which is a painting, and it's obviously like we're not looking for exact time and place, where I felt like the group's imagination was able to explore a little bit more.
Yeah, Ken, thank you. My reason for asking the question is because when we talk about image selection, there are things I want you to just to be aware of. If you use a photograph, because there's actual people in there, you tend to want to dive into that a little bit more and learn more about the people and get some solid, I don't want, solid's probably not the right word, but more concrete answers. With a painting, it can be because it's somewhat removed. So you kind of can look at it. You want to know a little bit more about this man or about the artist or about the setting, but then there's a little bit more freedom to that to allow more interpretation and different types of comments. So all of them are fair and all of them are wonderful. And so it's just something to be aware of as when we start talking about how to select images. So thank you for sharing that. Let's dive into the process just a little bit. There's one question that I ask at the beginning. The first thing I'm going to do is ask you just to sit and look at it. Sit quietly and look. One of the things when we're able to be in the museum again as a group, and I can't wait for that day because I'm struggling. Ken's been through a couple of my trainings, as is Willie, and they know that I struggle in virtual. I'm getting better, but I still struggle. The looking at the slides is a little bit different than being in front of the actual work. For example, this painting that we just looked at is huge. If you haven't been in the museum and seen it, it's a massive painting. And it's stunning. It's dramatically lit and it consumes you when you're standing in front of it. You can't help but just sort of be sucked into it. And more intimate things like the photographs or smaller paintings take on a different type of feel when you're in person. So it's a little bit different, but the discussions are still meaningful. So getting used to that virtual setting is great, but you still want to invite your group, whoever you're talking with, even if it's just you and another person, just take a minute, take a few seconds and just look at it and think about it before making a comment. And I want you to think about people such as first responders and even teachers. When you get a situation that's in front of you, and if you just could stop for a moment and just think about what it is you're looking at before reacting, before making an assessment, you have more information and you're not working on that initial gut feeling that you had. You might find that the more you look at it, the more you're going to find out and you're going to change your mind a little bit. But the first question, what's going on in this picture or what's happening in this picture, both are fair. What that's doing is really getting you into thinking about, the interpretation of it. What am I looking at? What is the story here? For very early learners, and even those who, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, who are just getting started with talking about art, they may start with listing. I see a man on a horse. I see a battle in the background. I see all this gold, stuff around him. That is typical of a very early art viewer, a very early learner. And that can be a child and it can be an adult. It doesn't matter if there's no practice or no experience in this. Those first initial comments might be a little, just lists, because that's where you're at developmentally in exploring the work. There's another question I would ask. You ask that question once, you don't ever have to ask it again. Once you get the conversation started, you need to be patient, give people time to respond. It can be a lot slower in a virtual setting than it can be in person, because there's that visceral reaction to being in front of an actual work of art that you don't get when you're looking at a computer screen. So be ready to have some significant wait time. But even if you're looking at a complex image in the museum, it can take a minute for people to respond. What do you see that makes you say that is a question that I asked, and I want you to think back. I want you to think back to the conversations and the times when I asked it. And I asked it when you gave me something that was open to an interpretation or another point of view. I wanted to know why you were saying what you were saying. Now, what do you see in this image that makes you say that? What is the evidence for why you're saying what you're saying? So you're looking for subjective comments. Things, if it's a guy on a horse, it's pretty obvious. I'm not going to ask you, what do you see that makes you say that? But telling me he's in a battle can be open to interpretation. Is he or isn't he? Let's dive into that. What do you see that makes you say that? That's where you are asking your for evidence. Why am I seeing this? What am I seeing that's leading me to say this? And so you want to listen very carefully to the types of comments that are being said so that you know when to ask this question. There's only one other one, primary question. There's 3 primary questions. These are it. And it's what more can you find or what more can we find? It's whatever you're comfortable with. It's a question you ask a lot. The developers, Abigail and Philip, would recommend that you do it before you move on to the next person each and every time. The question, it becomes invisible to many, 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 many people who are exploring your work of art. You don't hear it. You know it's there, but you don't hear it. But for those who are on the sidelines, who haven't yet participated, even those who are actively participating, it's a question that lets you know there's more here. There's more we can do. And let's take and let's explore that a little bit more. Give me some more. What more can you find? What more can we find? Does that make sense? Any questions or comments so far? I keep losing my cursor. There we go. Let's do another conversation. Take a moment to look at this. What's going on in this picture?
It looks like the woman might be an angel because of the wings on her back, and she's coming to into the household to bless the residents with some sort of gift. It looks like she might be holding a pot of flowers, maybe.
Okay.
And it looks like she's there honoring perhaps many of the spirits that have gone on before. And looking at the cloud, the bubble cloud above, as well as the icons on the wall there.
Okay, Beverly, you've given us a way of interpreting who the figure is, the prominent figure at the foreground of the composition, and you're suggesting this woman is an angel because of these big gold wings she has on her back, and that she's bringing a gift or an homage to this home. And you are looking at the pot of flowers that she's holding. And that gift or that homage could be to all those people you see in the clouds, all the people who've passed, but then also the 3 icons that we see right in the center, dead center of the composition. Thank you. What more can we find?
There was a comment kind of piggybacking the previous comment, and it mentions pictures of people who have been murdered.
Okay, who said that? May I ask?
Sure, that comment was made by Ellen.
Ellen, you're suggesting that these are pictures, this memorial are pictures of people who have been murdered. What do you see that makes you say that?
Ellen commented back by saying, by mentioning the names JFK, MLK, and RFK.
Okay, so you're looking at the 3 primary figures right in the middle of the composition, and that all 3 had been, of these figures, JFK, RFK, and Martin Luther King, had been assassinated. Okay, good. What more can we find?
We had a comment that says gold usually represents the presence of the divine, so the divine figure and the presence of the divine all around the lives of those people.
Okay, so someone is giving us a way of reading all this gold that's on it. And gold can sometimes represent the presence of the divine. And you've got gold going all the way around the outside of the composition. You've got gold around the figures in the clouds. these leaves, the gold wings. There's a lot of gold that's present here. And so we have the presence perhaps of the divine. Thank you. What more can we find?
The setting of the house looks like it's the 70s home or early 70s or something. I'm looking at the phone and the phone books and just the decor of the home.
Okay, so you're looking at the setting that we're in, and the home appears to be about the 70s, those big giant Ameritech, the yellow pages, and this big phone book, and the style of phone that's there on the floor in the lower left is sort of, you know, dating the image a little bit for us. Okay, good. What more can we find?
Also, it's harder to tell specifically who the faces of the other people are, but because of the, you know, JFK, MLK, and RFK, and Robert Kennedy, I'm imagining that these are people who were fighting for civil rights, social justice. They have wings in the background of each face.
Okay. All right, so you're diving into those figures that are in those cloud shapes a little bit more. And given the presence of RFK, JFK, and Martin Luther King, you're also noticing the wings that appear to be around those figures. And so you're suggesting that all of these figures may be civil rights icons or people who've lost their lives during the civil rights era. Good, thank you. What more can we find? Let's take one or two more.
Yeah, there was a comment made by Carol. It mentions white roses on left side. White represents purity. JFK, MLK, and RFK were great men whose lives ended too soon.
Okay, so thank you for that. There's the symbolism behind white flowers was purity. Did I get that? Really, did I get that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
what I
Okay.
think, yeah.
Thank you. Quite often you'll see white flowers in different works of art, and white often represents purity. And then a comment about the three figures in the center of the two Kennedys and Dr. King, and their lives were cut short too soon. Thank you. What more can we find?
I've got a comment here that says, go right ahead.
I was just going to say, I think this is a home of an African-American person because I'm looking at the magazines, and could be stereotyping, I don't know, but it's ebony and those types of magazines, and that's.
Yeah. So you're looking at the magazine rack that's in the back on the right-hand side, and you're seeing ebony. I think there's a Jet magazine in there too, if we could make the image a little bit bigger. So yeah, you're identifying perhaps the setting as the home or a place for African-Americans. Thank you. What more can we find? One more.
The comment that I've got here is the figures in the background suggest an opportunity to learn more, perhaps lesser known figures in the civil rights movement.
Okay, so that's a great segue actually. So we're looking at suggesting that these figures that are in the background, the ones that are in the little bubbles in the clouds, suggest that we might have an opportunity to learn more about figures that are a little bit lesser known. And that maybe the artist's intent here is to sort of draw attention to figures that we aren't as familiar with, or whose stories are ones that we could learn from. Okay, thank you. And that right there. And because this image is so dynamic, I don't usually do this right now, but I'm going to share now just a little bit of information. Willie, please share too. This was on loan to the DIA for a while from the Addison Gallery. And it's an image by Carrie James Marshall called Souvenir 2. And it is indeed all those figures up in the clouds. And to the side there are indeed civil rights icons. We have Emmett Till, Malcolm X is in there. We also got right next to JFK, if you can see the one figure, the woman, that's Viola Liuzzo from the Detroit area, who was also killed during the civil rights era. So we have all of these icons that are here. Willie, do you have anything more to share? I can't. About this?
The only thing I was really going to share is that Carrie James Marshall does have public works, and he also has another version of this in the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago. And as far as like the darkened figures go, I believe he is deconstructing notions of beauty within the African American community by using these figures.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Willie. So we were lucky to have this. We loaned our Big Hinda Wiley painting for a while. We got this in exchange, and it was a lovely exchange to have this on view. Thank you, everyone, for participating in that. I have just a few minutes before I want to take a break. I'm already way behind from where I want to be. So I want to review first the primary questions. What's going on or what's happening in this picture? What do you see that makes you say that? And what more can you find? Here's the process that I've been following and what you would follow too if you're going to use this. You want to invite to look, get everyone looking at it. You want to ask that first question. And when you're thinking about images, art is the low-hanging fruit. Art is open to interpretation. Even though there's a label in a museum that tells you something about it, there's still more to talk about. And that label was written by a person. And we've had it happen at the DIA quite often where we will get, and that person is usually a curator, and we'll get a new curator will come in and say, yeah, that's not the story I want to tell. And so that label goes away and a new label goes up in the museum, and we have to relearn or rethink our story. Also, new information can come to light about the artist or the time period or the work of art itself. And so there's always more. It's a fluid process, art history. You think it's really solid that, oh, we have all these textbooks that tell us this is what it is. It is until someone else comes along and says it isn't. So it's a wonderful thing to use art as this vehicle. But the process lends itself well to using different types of charts, graphs, text, which we're going to play around with in a moment after we take a break. There's all these wonderful other vehicles for using this process. You don't have to keep it to art, but art is going to be where you have the most success, and it's going to be the easiest to do. You're going to receive your response. You're going to paraphrase. So you want to make sure you paraphrase all the time. That adds clarity. It allows you to embed academic vocabulary. You want to be able to really explore what's saying. It also validates a comment. It's not meant to be neutral, but it's meant to be a brave space. Art isn't neutral and comments aren't neutral. So this way you can paraphrase, you can sometimes clean up language or allow for there to be a moment of learning that happens through the paraphrase. There's all sorts of wonderful things that happen there. And then you have two paths you can follow. When it's a clear observation, it's a man on a horse. You're going to go to path 2, you're going to paraphrase, and then go right to what more can we find? And then you're just going to keep repeating it until you get that subjective or interpretive comment where you're going to ask, you're going to paraphrase, and then say, what do you see that makes you say that? Then you're going to paraphrase the evidence, and then you're going to ask, what more can we find? And sometimes conversations can be so involved and so in-depth that you'll find yourself really digging into quite a few different aspects within one comment because so much can come out. And that's one of the wonderful things about not only the process, but also using art for the process. This image, I'm going to take just a moment to look at. It's one I've looked at or recently discovered. It's a contemporary African-American artist named Titus Kaphar. This is an image called Beyond the Myth of Benevolence. And so I want you to think about, I'm not going to have a conversation now because we're short on time, but I want you to think about this image as a way of showing maybe a split screen, doing a typical portrait of the man on the right, who is Thomas Jefferson, and then this image by Titus Kaphar, which shows the enslaved woman behind. And what that might be like to have a conversation with both images. There is this opportunity to have an open-ended conversation to really explore images that can dive into race and social justice and whose story are we hearing? Are we hearing the story of Thomas Jefferson from the viewpoint of the person who made the painting on the right? Or are we hearing the story of Thomas Jefferson from the viewpoint of the person who was enslaved on the left? And so sometimes it's giving a voice to someone whose voice hasn't been heard up to now. And so you've got some really powerful opportunities here. For those of you who are teachers or working with students, this is a wonderful opportunity to do a writing exercise. Explore the image, and have them give the woman on the left a voice. What would she say? You know, do thought bubbles if you're in something like Nearpod, or even in the chat, you can do thought bubbles. You know, what is she thinking or saying? So giving that voice, letting that wonderful, deep conversation happen. And this process allows for that, and that makes for a really amazing experience. So this image will be coming to you after this workshop's over. Ken's going to be sending you a slide deck. This image I did include because it is, I think, a powerful one for us to use if you're comfortable using it. The paraphrase, I want to dive into that a little bit before we get into taking a break, because the paraphrase is huge. You want to use neutral or non-judgmental language as much as possible. Neutrality can get a little tricky. As you know, we're living in a very hyper-politicized time. We know that words matter. And sometimes you have to drop that neutrality, but you still want to remain non-judgmental. There's a reason somebody's saying what they're saying. It may be that they're lashing out. It could be that they're angry. It could be, who knows what kind of baggage someone has. And it's how you choose to grapple with it. When you're working in a virtual format, you can hide the chat and filter those out and have a conversation with the person who said the troubling comment later. Or you can facilitate it in such a way that brings awareness as to why that comment is inappropriate or not conducive to the type of conversation you're having at that moment. That's entirely up to you. The paraphrase is a powerful tool in a variety of settings, which is why corporations have taken to the process. They practice with the art, but then they're using this process in business meetings to diffuse tense conversations around budgets. Well, what do you see that's making you say that? What are you hearing that's making you say that? What are you feeling right now that's making you say that? So that you can understand who the person is within your space. It's making something that you don't understand or saying something that you don't understand. To do that, you need active listening. So you need to really listen to what's being said, and you need to check back. If you noticed, I would quite often say, did I get that? Because I want to make sure I've got it right, that I'm understanding what you're saying. That's validating for the person, because they really believe, and it's true, that you want to know, because you don't want to put words in someone's mouth and you don't want to say something inappropriate as you're paraphrasing. You also want to use conditional language. So for you, you're suggesting this could be. Keeping it open-ended. So we're going to jump, because conditional language and new possibilities kind of go together. So it could be, it might be for you, you're suggesting, so you're bringing your prior knowledge or your experience into this and telling us that this is what you know. All of those things make it very personal for the person who's saying the comment, but also allows others to disagree in a polite, and it's okay to disagree. You don't have to agree on everything. We don't agree on everything. We're human beings. So this allows that process to happen. You can link comments and frame for context when possible. It's a little bit harder in a virtual setting, but if you notice, as someone earlier had also said, that this was a warrior. Or so you're building on what someone said earlier. So you're giving us another way of looking at this family grouping, that, you know, this could be, she could be the mother, and these are all of her children, with the woman in the other room in the mirror being the oldest daughter. So you want to draw attention to that. That's a scaffolding effect that allows different points of view to be heard, but also then starts making this narrative start to happen, which is a really powerful tool for negotiating, for understanding students, for even just, you know, understanding what someone is trying to say, but then also keeping those possibility words in there so that if someone disagrees, they can come in and say it safely. When you're framing, it's a little bit trickier in virtual, but it can be done. So you're taking a look at, you're giving us an idea of where this could be happening, that you're suggesting it could be in the Deep South, perhaps Mississippi, because of the door being open or the type of dwelling, or because you visited Mississippi and you saw things like this. So framing makes the thinking visible, and helps the person who's making the comment realize what they're thinking. Yeah, that is what I'm thinking. It's a little bit harder. It takes a lot of practice to do, and it's not always possible, but watch for it, give it a try. You want to be mindful of nonverbal communication. It's a little bit easier when we're not virtual, but you want to make eye contact as much as possible. You want to watch your body language and your facial expression. I have this really atrocious habit when I'm talking of furrowing my brow. And I do that when I'm listening, and it makes me look cross. And I'm not cross, I'm partially deaf in one ear, and that's how I listen and that's how I concentrate. And it wasn't until I watched myself on video that I realized, oh my God, I look really angry. And I wasn't. I was just trying really hard and that was my father did the same thing. So if you're going to be using this to facilitate discussions, just, sort of secretly record yourself and then watch it, and you learn a lot about your own little body tics and how you want to proceed. And then embed that academic vocabulary or give new words where it's appropriate. Remember not to change what someone has said, but if a student, for example, is looking at an image that, say, collage, but they don't necessarily know the word collage. It's made up of a lot of different pieces, and there's cloth, and there's pieces of paper. So you're noticing it's a collage, a work of art that's made of different pieces. What you're doing is taking that vocabulary and giving it a visual, and now it's going to stick. And that's what Dr. Hausen would call the sticking points. Whatever vocabulary you use is going to be stuck with that image, and the student will always remember what it is. So it's this really amazing tool that's so easy, and adults don't even realize that you're doing it, and it's this crazy good thing. Look for images that are diverse. So I pulled up images of a Native American to also get you to think about. There are some additional questions or prompts that you want to bring in at some point. Tell me some more about that. That's a big one. I use it a lot. I wish I had that with my kids when they were growing up. What more can you tell me about where or when this is happening? I use that with our first image because I wanted you to really dive into that dwelling and the time period. What more can you tell me about what is happening? If there's an action that you think that they might be able to dive into a little bit more, ask it. And what more can you tell me about this person, place, or thing? If there's an individual or an object that you want someone to go into, you did it anyway. You did it with the icebox in the first one, so I didn't have to ask it, but you got there. But if it wasn't there, you could draw attention to it if you want, especially if that's a lead in for something else. I've just thrown an awful lot at you. But this is an image I just want to go over. Remember, I'm going to scan a few by Canadian artist Attila Richard Lukács. And it's a great discussion, and it's available online, or I can send that to you. I can't remember if I put that in your slide deck. I think I did, but if I didn't, give me a shout. Remember to use documentary photography. This is from the Detroit riots of 1967, because if you're going to have conversations or learn about an era or a time period or even a contemporary challenge, sometimes looking at the history can help. And having those conversations about what you see happening here can help you have that broad conversation. Use contemporary imagery that's also a little cheeky, but also has a point. This is a contemporary Native American artist by the name of David P. Bradley, who's dealing with Native American stereotype, but then also the loss of indigenous iconography. Many of his images will have casinos in the background, and some lost references to the past. Don't forget, I promise we're going to take a break. Don't forget to paraphrase each comment, each observation, remain non-judgmental, make eye contact when you're being spoken to and when paraphrasing. Check back to make sure you understood, link similar to similar comments, frame paraphrases when possible, and point when possible. Are there any questions thus far? All right. I know I've got 10 minutes on there. Would you guys be comfortable with 5? Would that be okay? I'm not hearing any complaints. So let's take 5 minutes. It is now 2:35. Let's meet back here at 2:40. And we'll get started with the second half of this workshop. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Sue.
All right, Ken, are we ready to go?
I am definitely ready.
All right, good. Thank you, everyone, for letting me stretch And let's try something different. Take a moment to read this. This is a quote I pulled from a book. So let's dive into this a little bit. Tell me about it. What's going on in this quote?
I'll start us off.
Sure.
For me, I would say that it's asking for respect, both the respect for ourselves and then the respect of others' voices.
Okay, so Ken, when you read this quote, you're thinking about the word respect and the concept of respect, not only for yourself, but for others. What do you see that makes you say that?
Well, words like grace, you know, I think of grace in connection with respect.
Okay.
Authentic voice too, talking about self-respect.
Okay, so the inclusion of words like grace and authentic voice has for you this whole concept of respect. Okay, good. What more can we find?
I think it speaks to acceptance.
Okay, Candy, right? Candace?
Yes.
Okay, Candy, right? Candace? Yes. Okay. Oh, I'm getting some feedback. So you're looking at this feedback. Acceptance. Tell me about that. What do you see that makes you say that?
I think where it says let go of the biases, we're not all perfect, embrace, those things make me think, and several others as I'm looking through here, just makes me think that it's just talking about accepting one another as they are, you know, without the stereotypes and assumptions.
Okay, so you're up at the top of the text and you're looking at letting go of biases and those stereotypes that, as the writer says, unnecessarily divide us. And if you let that go, then it's about acceptance for you. Okay, good. What more can we find?
Right.
We've been going through a process or a journey since it starts. And here is what I have to say finally.
Okay, so someone has gone through, was that Russ? Did I see that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So you're looking at this and you're seeing that someone has gone through this journey and has gone through a process, and starting with that very first sentence, and here is what I have to say finally. This is where it comes to an end. This could be the beginning, but they got to the process, or went through this whole process, and they got here to this point. Thank you. What more can we find?
All the boxes can be wrapped in the same wrapping paper. They can have the same decoration. Boxes are all the same size. But when you open them up, they're not the same inside. Why do we expect that?
I didn't hear that very well. I apologize. Maybe if you put it in the chat. I apologize. Maybe if you put it. Yeah, the sound is cutting in and out for me. I really apologize. The sound is cutting in and out for me. I really apologize. Okay. Yeah, if you want to get that in the chat.
You know, also from the opening sentence, it makes me think that this is like the conclusion to something else this person was saying, that this is, you know, they're saying, and here is what I have to say finally. After everything else I said, this is how I sum it up.
Okay. So Candy, you're building a little bit on what Russ observed earlier, that in addition to it being an experience or something that a process that had happened, this could be at the very end of the text. And here is what I have to say finally. So you're building on that, you know, even where in the scope of there's a bigger something here attached to it. And we've got just a little bit of it. Okay, good. I'm going to stop that right there, just because for the sake of time, but just to give you an idea that you can, even though when we look at words and we look at written text, we can all see something a little bit differently or miss something. I often do historic letters. There's you can just look just about anywhere, just Google any figure that you're interested in, you're going to find something that they've written or a letter, and take the identity out and just dive into it and look at the words and think about, what are those words telling me? This quote, and you guys figured it out on your own, of course you may have already read it, is from this book, Becoming by Michelle Obama. And I thought that last sentence, I almost took it out because that's like a teller that it's Michelle Obama speaking, but maybe you won't remember. And so you can look at quotes from different sources, quotes from political leaders, quotes from inspirational speakers such as Michelle Obama. You can look at historic figures. I have a wonderful letter from Marie Antoinette that really helps you get into her head a little bit as she's writing to her mother. You can look at the Constitution and just VTS it. What does it really say? Looking at a newspaper article and seeing what's been left out by diving into the process. Just like looking at a visual image. You can all read the same things, but sometimes see something in it that's a little bit, see it different. And so having that conversation over the written text, what is really there, can help us dive into it. And it can also raise questions. And when you raise questions, whether you're working with students or in yourself, what you're doing is setting yourself up for some deep learning, or setting your students up for some deep learning. Because if you're asking questions, whatever information you find or dive into or dig into or do research on or just want to find out for yourself, that's got someplace to land. It's going to stick. That gets back to Abigail's sticking points. So don't limit yourself when you're thinking about what you want to think about, what you want to have this conversation with. You can do it with the written word as well. All right, let's take a moment and look at this. We're going to make a short discussion because I still have a lot to do. I want to make sure I get to it all. But I think we need to get back into just having an open discussion, a work of art. Take a moment to look. This is in the DIA's collection. And what's going on in this picture?
Well, to me, it's a bride and groom. Looks like it's on their wedding day. and they are posing for a portrait because it looks like a faux background. And I'm guessing that's a flower girl sitting on the floor, holding on to a toy.
Okay. All right, so Beverly, you're giving us a context for the work or a broad look at the work, and you're noticing this couple here that appears to be a wedding, from judging by the way they're dressed. They're posing for a formal portrait. You notice the background appears to be fake, like the artist's scrim or the portrait studio scrims that are behind them. And then the little girl on the floor, you suggested could be like the flower girl, and that she's holding a toy. What do you see that suggests to you she could be the flower girl?
Well, she has on a cute little dress too.
Okay.
And, I don't know, maybe the bow in her hat there makes it look like she's a distinguished party, a member of the wedding party.
Okay. All right. So the way she's dressed, the bow in her hair suggests that she's dressed up for this wedding. Perhaps it's the flower girl.
Yes.
Okay. What more can we find?
I'm seeing some comments about the child looks like a ghost, and then something similar that the photo is transposed on another and the girl looks faded, with it perhaps connecting the couple to a possible future. She could symbolize hope.
Okay, so we got a couple things going on there. There was a comment that the girl looks ghost-like. Tell me about that. What do you see that makes you say she looks ghost-like?
This is Sandra. Well, for me, she looks transparent. You can see the painting on the wall, or it's through her face, it's through her bow. You can kind of see through her. So to me, that kind of suggests that she's there, but maybe she's not there. And even the doll. And maybe it has something to do with the bride becoming a woman now and no longer a child, where she would play with dolls. And that kind of fading away. And then she's becoming a woman in this marriage photo.
Okay, Sandra, thank you. You took a really close look at this little girl, and you're noticing that she's somewhat transparent, that you can see the lines from the backdrop through her. You can see it go through her, a little bit around her eyes, around her face, and through the bow. And that perhaps this is a message about the passage of time, that this bride is no longer a child playing with dolls, and is grown into this position of being a wife and maybe even a future. I think someone in an earlier comment in the chat had said something about perhaps looking at that future a little bit, and a symbol of hope for the child or children in the future. Very good. Thank you. What more can we find?
Carol made a comment saying the young bride and groom are looking at their child, who is either to be born in the future or deceased, because it's a double exposed photo, can see through it.
Okay, so Carol, you're looking at the technique that the artist used, the technique of double exposure, and that explains this ghost-like image of this little girl, and positing that perhaps this is that this future child, or perhaps they had a child that's deceased, and why there would be the inclusion of this ghost-like image. Okay, good, thank you. What more can we find?
I find it interesting that the only one that's looking at us is the bride. Even the groom, I'm assuming, is looking at the bride, and even the young girl is not looking at us, but just the bride is kind of connecting with us in this photo.
Okay, so you're looking, Ken, at the gazes on these figures, and only the bride is engaging with us. The groom is looking down at her, and even the child is looking down. And so you find that intriguing, that this bride has chosen to look out at us. Good. Let's take one more. What more can we find?
Someone just commented about there being two hearts with an arrow through them on the bricks.
Yeah, if you look again on that background and that backdrop, you can see two little hearts almost in the center, just a little bit left of center. with arrows going through it. Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, look at different sources. Look at old photographs. And there's a difference in the way you look at a photograph and the way you look at a painting, which you've already discovered. We're going to move ahead and look for images, depending on the type of conversation you want to have. Images such as this. This is by Hank Willis Thomas, and it's titled Cotton Bowl. Just a note that images that are being used for education fall under fair use guidelines. But if you do choose to have something published or printed elsewhere, those are subject to copyright laws, and you might be in trouble if you try using it. So, but if you find it on the web and you're using it for education, it's fair use and you can use it. And that's the case with this one, where a type of conversation you would have with this work would be one that reflects on the past, but also the impact on the future. It also is sort of a social critique on sports and the status of particularly Black athletes as they are. And he's not, Hank Willis Thomas is not the only artist to do this, but has talked about the fact that even the professional athletes are somewhat owned, by the people who own the teams. They can't choose what products to endorse on their own. They have to get permission from the team owner, or from the team, or from the NFL or AHL or whatever. I'm not a sports person, but all of those things are part of the conversation and that you can have. This is another one by Hank Willis Thomas called Priceless. And it's a riff on the old MasterCard ads. And this is also a great one for those of you who are teachers and working with students for a writing, having a VTS discussion over it to explore it visually, and then diving into it a little bit, letting them write, reflections, even just a broad reflection, because it's a tough image to look at, but it's a really powerful image. And this was someone he knew, a funeral for someone he knew. So when you're thinking about images, I want you to think about the ones we've already looked at and talked about, and thinking about how you want to use them, where you want to look. There are some that you should also avoid, and we'll talk about that. But you want to consider ambiguity. If you're working primarily with adults, you want images that are something that has something in it that they can find intriguing. So a slight bit of ambiguity helps. You don't want to throw a complete abstract up first, because that's just going to say, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. So you want to make sure that there's something in there that whoever your group is, or your person is that you're going to be talking to, there's something in that you recognize. But having just enough ambiguity helps to have that story sort of build. You want to try to figure out what it is. Strong narratives are great. They're easier, particularly when you're just getting started using the process. You want to look for appropriateness. Know who it is you're talking to. Adults, you have a little bit more latitude, but even with that, depending on the setting, you might want to carefully select different types of images to make it easier. This, I know, is part of the week-long celebration for Martin Luther King, so I am using images by artists of color. But you can, tailor it any way you want, but think about which images are going to be appropriate for your group. You want to be as diverse as possible, not just in the artist that you're using or the type of art, but also the medium. When you can, like today I'm doing paintings and photography and text, so we've got a little bit of different things in there. Think about sculpture, think about once you're in the classroom, think about doing an object, putting that object on the table and just going through the process of exploring this object. All of these different things are viable and make for really strong conversations. Consider non-art images. We did a little bit of a text, but passages from books. Mark Twain is a great source for quotes. Also musicians, think about different songs. I've used a lot of Tupac in my training. I've also used Mark Twain, John Steinbeck. So think about the type of text you want to explore and do it. Just have fun with that. Graphs, And for those of you who work in math or science, graphs and charts are also highly VTSable, and you can really dive into it. Unless you know who your group is, you want to avoid strong religious content, partly because you don't want someone to say something inadvertently offensive to someone of a different faith, or someone who perhaps someone who doesn't understand the iconography of a particular faith. So I tend to avoid anything that's overtly religious. You want to avoid graphic nudes until you know the comfort level of the group you're working with. It seems sometimes ridiculous, especially when you're working with adults or older art students in high school, but there are some inhibitions there, and you want to make sure that the person is comfortable. So avoiding the graphic nudes until you know who they are. You want to avoid certain artifacts or non-Western images, because especially with early learners, because they'll have no context for them. So if you've been in the DIA's collection or even are familiar with, say, an African male figure, students really don't know what that is and will often make a connection to a voodoo doll, which they've seen in movies or cartoons or things like that, but they will not have seen a nail figure. Nothing could be further from the truth. So you don't want them to land somewhere, come away with an impression of something that's not correct. So be careful about using artifacts that they won't have a frame of reference for. And abstract art is, for many, many, many people just getting started looking at art, can be really difficult. It has the I don't like that, or the, it's a very idiosyncratic feel that you get with abstract art. They don't like it, or it's that I could do that, which we hear a lot in the museum. Lily can attest to that. We hear it quite often. And because there isn't enough experience in looking at art to be able to look at an abstraction and really understand and dive into it. But if you're an art student, or you're working with other artists, or you're teaching art students, it's fair game. Dive into that stuff. And once again, art images do fall under fair use guidelines when used for education. But if you are looking at publication, it's best to check for copyright.
Sue, there was a question before you move on about, someone brought up the question about what about manuscripts, the St. John's Bibles, illuminations. Those are religious yet very engaging.
Absolutely. My recommendation would be to give a context for them. So let's say we're going to take a look at this illumination from the Bible, so that someone coming in will know ahead of time what it is. You haven't really dived into the image, but they have a context for it. For any kind of imagery that supports your teaching or supports what you're looking at, that someone may have a little bit of a lack of a background on, you're more than welcome to introduce it or give a context for it. It does not substantially change the course of the discussion, but it helps to sort of make it a little bit safer space for the conversation to happen. That was a great suggestion. Thank you. So just to reiterate, don't shy away. All of the stuff you see on the screen right now is fair game. Documentary photography from post-World War II, this image of this Japanese family, this quote, "How can you see clearly when you're looking into the sun? How can an icon be a con?" is a quote from a New York Times columnist, Maureen Dowd. The Big Bang Theory, or the images from a child's story, this Peter Reynolds image that you see up at the top. All of these things are fair. Video is a blast. We have a couple of video installations in the museum that are so much fun. It takes a lot of time because you got to watch the video. They're so much fun because you're so intent on watching the video, you're sometimes not paying a lot of attention to the things that are going on in the background, and the process allows that to happen. So if you have the luxury of time, I also recommend doing video. Again, another image by David P. Bradley. You can see the image of Santa Fe in the background, and the casino, and the Lone Ranger, and all of these things that deal with stereotype, the poker chips and the cards and the money and the girly magazines, all of these things that are this encroachment on Native American lands. His images are readily available. They're great discussions, so take advantage of those and look them up if it is of interest to you. Images from other cultures. Remember, I was talking about diversity. Don't forget images by women, of women. This is the artist Shirin Neshat. She's an Iranian-American artist, currently living and working in New York. It's from her Women of Allah series. where the women of Iran took up arms shortly after the fall of the Shah, and where they were forced to veil again. And here she is showing that, they took up arms because they were also defending their families. And these images are very powerful, and it can open up a new avenue for discussion. It can raise awareness of a different culture or a different story than what you've known before. So, and Shireen Nishad also does video that is dynamic and really spectacular for this process. So she is one I would recommend using. Let's take a look at how we know this works and where it came from. Let me introduce you to Abigail Hausen. I forgot to change this slide, my apologies. She recently passed away. We lost her after many, many years of research. She passed away with her family. She lived in Cambridge. She was the daughter of a cognitive psychologist and an art historian. So she was sort of like lined up to not only think about thinking, but then also think about how art can help with that. She began researching thinking in 1979 while she was still on staff at Harvard, and was looking for a way to help students who struggle in the classroom. Standardized tests are a reality, and anyone who's taken a standardized test or any test, for example, know that anything can impact how a student looks at art looks at the test or takes the test. It can be whether they have breakfast that day. It can be, do they have an understanding of the words that are being used? Is there a reading problem? Is there a vision problem? Is there a hearing problem? All of these things. Is there a socioeconomic reason why they have difficulty struggling with tests? Or is it just that's not how they learn? Everybody learns differently. And so she was looking at how can we help students pass these tests? They're a reality, they're not going away. So she spent 20 years. She was a bit of an overachiever, Abigail. And conducting what she called aesthetic development interviews, haunting with her team of interns and students, haunting the museums around Boston and Cambridge. She asked individuals standing in front of select works of art just to talk about it. What are you noticing? And after 20 years of gathering data, she began to code all of those into 5 stages of cognitive development. I'm going to talk about those in a moment. She developed a pilot methodology with museum educator Philip Yenowin, who I'll introduce you to shortly. And then she began testing this theory and refining the process. In 1999, she published her first longitudinal study, the results of this 5-year study in Byron, Minnesota, called Eye of the Beholder, Research, Theory, and Development, where with this 5-year study that she did in Byron, she found that there was significant growth in cognitive development in students exposed to VTS. It charges the brain. It gets the brain thinking. It gets it going. And you can imagine if you're working with students, just starting the day with one quick discussion around a work of art, you've got them going. And I have teacher after teacher after teacher, I have tons of anecdotal evidence of teachers saying exactly that. It gets them to focus, but it also engages their brains. She co-founded Visual Understanding and Education with former museum educator Philip Yenowin. VTSHome.org is its current location. And as it says, it continues to do research. Sadly, that as of this past summer, that's no longer true. The educator is Philip Yenowin, who is still working with VTS. He is the co-founder of Visual Understanding. It says semi-retired. I swear the man's not retired at all. But while working as an educator at MoMA, he was doing what I was doing. I started out, I've actually been with the DIA for approximately 35 years, closing in on 23 as an educator, but I volunteered, I worked in other capacities, and did exactly what I loved doing, was leading tours, regurgitating volumes and volumes of data on a work of art that nobody remembered, nobody cared about, but they were really impressed with how much I knew and would give me rounds of applause at the end. I felt fantastic. They were working on there absolutely nothing. So he was introduced to Abigail, and they began to work together on the visual thinking strategies. And nothing comes out of a vacuum. All of these theorists, even, Howard Gardner and everything coming out of Project Zero, which Abigail was also intrinsically involved with, comes from the past. And all of these other wonderful brains of Arnheim and Piaget, Vygotsky, Baldwin, Dewey. They all contributed to this body of knowledge we have about how students learn, how people learn. The title of Visual Thinking Strategies is in honor of Arnheim, whose research led him to write convincingly about the connection between the visual perception and thought. Philip went on to write this book here. It's a quick read, and it's like everything you need to know about VTS in a nutshell. If any of you work with preschool, this is the preschool book, this is the regular book. Super easy, both available on Amazon if you want to dive into it a little bit more. And he now currently works developing an online VTS collaborative called Watershed, and you can look that up on yourself. It's a really awesome website. It's just getting started with his partners, Nick Gardner and Lynn Pfeiffer. And they're doing an amazing job of getting Watershed into schools in more rural areas. And now that we're virtual, it's even more important that this resource is out there and available. When Abigail was doing her coding, she came up with 5 stages. And primarily everyone we're going to come in contact with is going to be stage 1, stage 2, or a combination of stage 1 and stage 2, because as you're growing aesthetically, you're going to sometimes waffle between stage 1 and stage 2, or stage 2 and stage 3. And stage 1 are all early learners and even a lot of adults. And this is your accountive. They're storytellers. They use their senses and their memories and their personal associations to make these concrete observations about works of art. They often will do lists. It's a girl in a mirror, it's a dog's face. All of these things are part of, you can spot a stage 1 learner by the types of comments they make. Stage 2 are the constructive. You want to start building a framework for what you're looking at. You start questioning, you start using the word because, you've got all sorts of little things that you're starting to bring in to build this framework for this work of art that you're looking at. So these are where most people fall into is stage 2. Stage 3, whoops, I didn't even put it in here. Stage 3 is your art historian. Those are the curators, and they categorize everything, the name, the date, the place, what type of medium is, all that kind of stuff. That's your stage 3 learner. Then 4 and 5 are the ones who had these visceral, emotional reactions to art and long experience looking at art. And so if you, in general, you're never going to meet people like that because they tend to be a little bit more loner. If they're having those visceral reactions and experience with art, they've spent a lifetime doing it. Here's a writing sample. I want to give you a little background on Cameron. As you can see, he was a 4th grade student in Syracuse. He was struggling in all of his courses. The teacher and the school that he was in reached out to Philip and Abigail and asked for help. What can we do to help students like Cameron? And they said Cameron in particular was the one they're focusing on because he was the one who was the furthest behind. And they introduced VTS into the classroom. And it was to give you a framework for what the VTS lesson would look like. It would be 3 images, 3 individual discussions over 3 images once a month. That's it. It's a very small impact. And that's what Abigail found with her original study too. Very minimal impact or exposure can lead to huge growth. And so they introduced VTS, and because they already knew based on the Byron study that growth first appeared in writing, Cameron here submitted this writing sample. So they looked at a work of art and asked him to write about it. What are we noticing about this? Take a look at it. What is Cameron doing?
He's listing what he sees.
Yeah, he's listing. He's very stage 1, and he's a solid stage 1. He's not making any kind of meaning out of this. He's just listing everything he sees. So they did that. They put it away. They did several months of VTS, gave him some more exposure to VTS. They brought that same image back out, and he wrote again. What do we see happening here? There's one big word in there. I want to see if you can spot it. It's in the 4th line down. I think she is hot because,
Because
yeah, he's giving us evidence. He has shown already a tremendous amount of growth. And look at these sentences. These sentences are amazing. I see, oh, even because it's even earlier, I see an African lady that looks hot because she has a fan. These are incredible sentences, and he doesn't just stop there. He keeps on going. So his writing is getting richer. He's using evidence. He's using more complete sentences, and he's starting to grow. He's starting to have this growth, which showed up over and over and over again. Images like this, I'm going to skip over. We kind of already looked at it. Banksy. Let me go back to this for a minute. So I'm going to, at the very end, we're going to dive into reflective practice here in a moment. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to start talking really fast. I want you to just kind of keep this in mind as you're thinking about the impact that it can have on learners, on yourself. The more exposure you give yourself, the better you are going to be at articulating, the better you're going to be at listening, the better you're going to be at getting your point of view across, because you're going to have better skills for it. That's what this process will do. There's all kinds of wonderful things that happen. Again, going into some images, this is a documentary photo post-World War II Japan. Banksy is a great resource if you're looking at contemporary commentary and critique. Just Google Banksy and this is going to come up for you.
Thanks.
But I want you to think about also reflective practice. When you're practicing reflectively, you're always thinking about what you're thinking. I can tell you right now, I'm certain, and when the clock strikes 3:30 and we're done, I'm going to be shutting this down and I'm going to be making some notes and thinking, what could I have done differently? What would I have cut out? What would I have added? Where did I see a challenge that I could have done better? Because there's always room to grow and there's always something to think about and learn from. And reflective practice is huge. This is in the DIS collection. This is Claude Cahun, born Lucy Schwab, one of the first transgendered artists to begin producing work. This dates from about 1927. He was living in Germany at the time, and then with the outbreak of World War II, fled and went back home to England. And always has this reflective, quite often will have a mirror or a reflective ball in his work because he was struggling with his own identity. But questions you can ask yourself, and these are the ones that I'm going to do. What did I notice? How did that feel? Now, if it didn't feel right, then something was wrong and you got to figure out what it is. What worked well? What did I enjoy? Give yourself, what did you have fun with? What challenges did I have? What can I do differently? What did I notice that this happened? How can I change that for next time? Did I have any surprises? And there's always a surprise, so think about that one. What am I going to work on for next time? Do I have questions? What are my takeaways? Journaling, write it down. I will have a lot of notes. Each training I do, I have its own folder and I'm making a lot of notes so I can look back at that the next time. So when I go in again, I can not only know the images I've used, but know what worked really well and build on that, but then know exactly what I would change. And sometimes I'll even talk it through with my colleagues at the DA. Say, it's really, and Willie's going to get an earful of me. He's going to be talking to me a lot about things that I could have tried differently to make this a really good experience. These are some of the early studies these are all independent studies that I encourage you to take a look at on the vtshome.org website. These are all in the public spaces, so you don't need a password to get into it. But if you're a big nerd like I am, you like to read stuff like this. And the good news is the one that's going to be toughest to read is the third one down, the Aesthetic Development and Creative and Critical Thinking Skills Study from San Antonio, and the last one. Abigail writes as a cognitive psychologist for a cognitive psychologist. So, go to the summaries, unless you're really into looking at data. The summaries are easier to read and it encapsulates everything that's in the studies. But then also take a look at anything written by Philip. He's an educator, he writes like an educator, and it's easier to wrap your brain around. But they're fascinating to see what they did. There's also some videos available of students in action if you want to see them. There's some great ones coming out of the Gardner Museum in Boston. So take a look at those too if you get a chance. We are at the point where I'm going to shift gears, but before I talk about coming down to the museum, I want to see if you have any VTS questions, related questions or comments, anything you'd like to share before I start wrapping up. You've been very patient with me. I've been blathering a lot this last hour. Willie or Ken, is there anything in the chat?
Nope, nothing's in the chat yet.
Okay.
Nope.
Feel free to add stuff. They know to interrupt me, so don't hesitate. But if you haven't visited the DIA, it is open. Please come on down. Attendance is limited, so I recommend reserving in advance. You can go on the website and just reserve a time slot that you want to come in. It'll be easier and faster for you to get into the building. You will have to do a temperature check and do the health screening to get inside. You will be required to wear a mask. Most of the museum is touch-free right now because we want to reduce contact. So there's no food service, but there are water stations available. But the local restaurants in the area, and there's some great ones within walking distance that we encourage you to participate or to visit. There's some really good ones just right across the street from the museum. And give them your patronage because restaurants are also struggling right now. There's a lot of information on the DIA's website about the safety protocols in place, how the museum gets cleaned. We have shortened hours so that we can make sure that the museum is clean. Willie can tell you that building has never been cleaner. Having been in a 30+ year history with that museum, I've never seen it that clean. It's amazing, and our housekeeping staff is doing an incredible job of keeping all the surfaces clean and sanitized for you. We're not handing a lot of things out. There's very few things. We will hand you a map when you come in if you want one, but that's it. So there's no gallery guides. A lot of the interactives have been moved out of the galleries to reduce touching. Some have been converted to just being on a loop. So you just walk into the space and it's already running. Others are still in the process of being converted. That's a little expensive. So it's taking a minute to get them all up, but we will. But we do encourage you to please come and visit us. Let's take a little look at some objects in celebration.
Sue, before we get started, there's a comment.
Please, go ahead.
Christian asked for the names of stages 3 through 5.
Oh, God, I knew you were going to do that. Stages 3 through 5, we have accounted. You know what, Christian? Because I don't have that committed to memory right at this moment. I'm going to ask if you would either email me. I'm going to give you my email and I'd be happy, and I'll even talk you through them. Or we can, you can go on that VTS home website and you'll see all the stages are there. So, but I'm happy to meet with you, separately, because there's a lot there, and it's pretty intense, which is why I chose to leave it out here, because we could have a whole day's training just on that. So thank you. That's a great question. And next time there's an improvement for me, I'll be sure to just put them in there so you at least have it. Let's take a quick look at some works by artists of color that are in the DIA's collection, such as Romare Bearden's Quilting Time, a massive mosaic that was commissioned by the artist shortly before his death by the DIA in honor of the DIA's 100th birthday in 1986. Queen Mother Helen Moore is a relatively new acquisition for the DIA, and how I know that, if you take a look, and I'm going to give you a tip if you want to learn more about a work of art. What I've added to these slides are what we call the tombstone. That's the information. The only thing I left out is who gave it to us or how we got it. But that number at the bottom that says 2017.51, this is the only object in the collection that has that number. That's the cataloging number. You can take that number to the information desk or to the website, and you can enter it, and it'll pull up more resources around that object. That tells you that this was the 51st work of art to enter the DIA's collection in the year 2017. This is a lovely little work on copper by Detroit artist Mario Moore. Queen Mother Helen Moore is his grandmother. And she is a local activist in the city of Detroit. If you watch the news and there's anything about the Detroit School Board, she's there in making her voice heard. She's committed to education of children. The images you see that she's holding are her 3 sons. And the one on the left, who's got the hand on the chin, is Chris Moore. He also works at the DIA. and is Mario's father. This is by Peter Williams. At the time that he created this image, he was on staff at Wayne State University teaching fine art. He's now in Baltimore, I believe, having gotten rich and famous and moving on from the Detroit area. This is a portrait of a Fourth Reich skinhead who is planning to start a race war. It's a disturbing image. It's tough to look at. Phenomenal for VTS, but be ready for some hard conversations if you're going to use it. Howardina Pindell, this is one of my favorite objects in the collection. She created this image after the bombing of the hospital of Ramallah, and then began to really think about, or after, excuse me, back up a minute. She lives in Salzburg, Pennsylvania. If you look at the upper left, she has intrauterine fetal deaths caused by CS560, which is a neurotoxin or chemical weapon that's used in warfare. And she found out from her home in Pennsylvania that our government is still producing and using this weapon. And then she was focusing on that primarily when the bombing of the hospital of Ramallah happened. And she decided to make this about global oppression. When you're in, it's a very textured surface, and it's the canvas that is attached directly to the wall in the gallery. She has used her own body, and it sort of reminds you of a crime scene with these chalk outlines. And she questions everything. How dare you question? And getting you to think about censorship and the media and all of these things that are happening in the world, and we need to have these conversations. It's a powerful image. It's a great one if you're a teacher and you're looking to bring text and imagery into your classroom. This is a great one to use. Southern Pasture is the one most directly related to Dr. King. This image was done at about the time that he did the speech, the iconic speech for I Have a Dream. The image shows a little girl whose dream is an education, and it's around the time of Brown versus Board of Education, which ended segregation in schools. And one of everybody's favorites, and if you haven't seen this in person, you really must. It's Something You Can Feel by the artist McLean Thomas, covered with lots of glitter and sequins, and the lighting on it and the thing just sparkles when you come into the room. It's huge, and it's a nice partner to the Kahinda Wiley. And so please come and see those and have this wonderful experience exploring some works of art. There's some a huge collection of African-American art. The DIA was the first museum to dedicate galleries and hire a curator explicitly for the collection of African-American art. So come and celebrate with us. Going on right now are 2 exhibitions. Both are free. Detroit Style Car Design in the Motor City, 1950 to 2020. If you ever thought a full-size automobile would not fit in the DIA, well, guess again, there are, I think, 6 of them in this exhibition. So come on in and see this Firebird in person, along with the design and how artists, car designers are going through the same processes as artists like Diego Rivera and Pablo Picasso and Kahinda Wiley. Russ Marshall Detroit Photographs have many, many images from the assembly line, in addition to just images of Detroit during the same era. So they're both amazing. But coming up next year, the 2 exhibitions that were postponed just a wee bit is the one on the left is Artemisia Gentileschi and Women Artists. If you are familiar with this painting, you know it's one of our favorites. It's also on OCC's campus, I think out in Auburn Hills. And it's been gone from our galleries for a long time because it's traveling with the exhibition. If you've been reading any articles in the media about art exhibitions, this image has been used a lot. And it's coming home soon, and we're excited. We can't wait. An exhibition that the DIA is putting together, Van Gogh in America, focusing on, as the anchor, will be our self-portrait of Vincent van Gogh, the very first Van Gogh to enter in an American art collection. The DIA has that distinction. We were collecting Van Goghs long before anybody else. How cool is that? So with that, I hope to see you down at the museum. If you want to reach out to me, here's my email. It will be in that slide deck that Ken is going to send to you. I had so much fun. I want to reach out to Willie first and say, Willie, thank you for being my eyes and ears today. Ken,
Absolutely.
as always, thank you for everything and for inviting me. I'm going to stop sharing. And and try to see some of you, I'm hoping. Here we go. And see if there's any last questions, anything you'd like to share, anything I can answer for you before we say goodbye for the day.
Liz commented, and thank you for having an enlightening workshop. That was by Liz.
Thank you. You're welcome. And Christian, I promise, please email me and I will get you those even today. If you want to email those to me, I'll get those to you.
He mentioned that he'll check out the website.
Excellent. Okay. And don't forget, if you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to help get the rest of the stages to you. And like I said, that by asking that question, I was not prepared for it. And so I didn't think to include it. And now I will. So thank you for doing that. Okay.
Sue, I just want to say thank you so much on behalf of all of us at OCC. It was just a joy to have you with us today. Really appreciate it. And, I know you said you prefer the medium of being out in person. I prefer that as well. But, I've been through this both in person and now virtually, and you didn't miss anything. It was wonderful.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. It's harder virtually because I can't see you. So I struggle, but thank you for that. It's always a pleasure. And please come see us. Reach out anytime. I'm available for you.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I want to mention to the group here while I've got your attention that we have 3 more events. I'm going to share my screen for just a second to show you what we've got going on the rest of the week here. This is this is our Eventbrite site that you should be able to see here. And what that is you can see we've got an event tomorrow hosted. If you were at our discussion yesterday, that's going to be hosted by Alfred DeFries, who's one of our panelists. Really looking forward to that event. That starts at 12 o'clock to 1. You can go to I'll send a link when I send the email along with all the information that was included in today's presentation. We also have, starting at 2:30, the Black Student Union is going to be hosting an event. They just sent me their presentation, and that's going to be a wonderful discussion with 3 of the student leaders from that organization, leading us through their discussion and their views on what's going on in the world today. And then we're going to end this week's discussion with the Dr. Martin Luther King Convocation, which will feature Dr. Rita Fields, who's just got an amazing bio, as well as just an amazing story to tell. And we're really looking forward to that keynote speaker. The other thing that I wanted to mention too, let me stop my sharing my screen, is that Sue discussed a couple pieces of art that are on our campuses. We have a close partnership with the DIA, and currently we have a program going on called the Inside Out Project. This is our second year doing this, and the DIA was gracious enough to extend it throughout the winter, given the pandemic that's going on. So we have 15 pieces of artwork on our campuses right now. Each of them have 2 to 3 pieces of artwork spread throughout all 5 campuses. And I'll include that map with the email. So that way, if you get a chance to go out, our campuses are, the campuses are beautiful. So feel free to walk around our campuses on the outside and see the artwork that we've got. All the artwork is outside, so you can be social distance and safe and see that artwork and engage with it. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for coming. Thank you all for the great discussion. And Sue and Willie, thank you so much for lending your time and your talent today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Call us again.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You guys too. Bye.
You too. Bye.